The scent of old books and damp earth. That's what did it. One moment I was just another face in the bustling coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm latte and scrolling through endless news feeds. The next, that particular musty aroma, carried on a phantom breeze, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just a smell. It was a key, turning in a lock I'd spent 30 years trying to rust shut. And with that click, the door to my childhood, a door I'd believed permanently sealed, creaked open, letting in the chill of a terror I thought I'd outrun. I dropped my phone, the clatter echoing too loudly in the sudden silence of my own mind. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the return of an old, unwelcome rhythm. It was back. The demon. My childhood demon. The one I'd convinced myself was a figment of an overactive imagination, a nightmare born of too many scary stories in a lonely, creaky old house. But the smell, so distinct, so utterly it, was undeniable. It was the smell of the crawl space beneath my childhood home, a place I hadn't dared to venture since I was 7 years old, a place where shadows writhed and whispers slithered just beyond the reach of hearing. I remember the first time I truly felt its presence. It wasn't a visual thing, not at first. It was a coldness that seeped into the very marrow of my bones, even on the hottest summer days. It was the feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck that never quite went away when I was alone in the house. My parents, bless their oblivious hearts, attributed it to drafts or an overactive imagination. Boys will be boys, always making up stories, my father would chuckle, ruffling my hair. My mother would just sigh, her eyes filled with a weariness I now understand was born of a different kind of haunting. The haunting of bills and responsibilities. They couldn't see it. They couldn't feel the oppressive weight that settled in the corners of my room after dark. The way the shadows seemed to deepen and coalesce into something almost solid. But I saw it, or rather, I felt it. It started in my bedroom closet, a small, unassuming space filled with my clothes and forgotten toys. But at night, it became a gaping maw, a portal to something unspeakable. I'd lie in bed, rigid with fear, listening to the faint scratching sounds from within. Not the scurrying of mice, no. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like long, brittle fingernails dragging across rough wood. And then the whispers. They were never clear, always just at the edge of audibility, a sibilant hiss that seemed to coil around my ears, promising unspeakable things. I'd pull the covers over my head, burying myself in the false safety of my blankets, praying for the dawn. But the whispers always found their way in, burrowing into my dreams, twisting them into grotesque parodies of reality. One night the scratching stopped. The whispers ceased. A profound, suffocating silence descended, far more terrifying than the sounds. And then the closet door, which I had meticulously ensured was latched shut, slowly, agonizingly, began to creak open. Just a sliver at first, a hairline crack of darkness that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a dream, a hallucination. But the creaking continued, slow and deliberate, until a gap wide enough for a child's hand appeared, and in that gap, I saw it. Not a full form, not yet, but a glimpse. A patch of something dark, impossibly dark, darker than any shadow, with a texture that seemed to absorb the very light from the room. And then, a single, elongated finger, skeletal and glistening, slowly, deliberately began to curl around the edge of the doorframe, pulling it wider. That was the night I knew. It wasn't just in my head, it was real, and it wanted me. For years I tried to forget. I moved away from that house, from that town, from the very memory of that suffocating fear. I built a life, a seemingly normal one, filled with work, friends, and the comforting mundane. I convinced myself it was all a childish nightmare, a product of an overactive imagination fueled by too many late-night horror movies. But the scent of old books and damp earth, that insidious, forgotten trigger, had ripped open the carefully constructed facade of my sanity. Now, the subtle manifestations began. It started with the whispers again, faint at first, like the rustling of dry leaves just outside my window, even when there was no breeze. Then, the cold spots. Not just a draft, but a sudden, localized drop in temperature that would send shivers down my spine, even in the warmth of my apartment. I'd find objects subtly rearranged. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren, every rustle of the wind outside my window became amplified, distorted into something menacing. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, convinced that the shadows in the corners of my room were deepening, shifting, coalescing into familiar, terrifying shapes. Paranoia became my constant companion. I started avoiding social gatherings, convinced that the demon was somehow tethered to me, a dark secret that would eventually reveal itself and shatter my carefully curated life. My friends noticed, of course. "You look exhausted, man," they'd say, their voices laced with concern. "Everything all right?" I'd force a smile, mumble something about work stress, and retreat further into my self-imposed isolation. The physical manifestations followed. I'd wake up with faint red scratches on my arms, thin lines that looked like they'd been drawn by something sharp and delicate. I'd dismiss them as accidental, perhaps from restless sleep, but the pattern was always the same. 3 parallel lines, just like the marks I'd found on the inside of my childhood closet door. One evening, as I was making dinner, I felt a cold touch on my shoulder, a fleeting pressure that sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty kitchen, the simmering pot on the stove, and the growing certainty that I was not alone. Desperate, I started researching. I scoured old folklore, local legends, anything that might shed light on what I was experiencing. I found vague references to shadow entities, to ancient spirits that fed on fear, to things that lingered in the liminal spaces between worlds. None of it offered concrete answers, only fueled my growing terror. I even dug out an old, dusty journal from my childhood, a relic I thought I'd long since destroyed. In its childish scrawl, I'd documented my early encounters, the scratching, the whispers, the slowly opening closet door. Reading those words, written by a terrified 7-year-old, was like reliving the nightmare. The fear was just as potent, just as real. And then, a chilling realization struck me. The last entry in the journal wasn't about the demon leaving. It was about me running away. I hadn't banished it. I had merely abandoned it, leaving it to fester, to grow, to wait. And now, it had found me again. It was time to go back. Back to the house. Back to the crawl space. Back to where it all began. The old house stood exactly as I remembered it. A silent sentinel of forgotten fears. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the overgrown garden choked the path to the front door. It looked like a skeleton, picked clean by time and neglect. But, to me, it was a living, breathing entity. Its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the twilight. A shiver, not from the evening chill, ran down my spine. This was it, the place where my nightmare began, and where, I hoped, it would finally end. I pushed open the creaking front door, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating the ghosts of my past. Every step I took was a journey deeper into the labyrinth of my own fear. I walked through the living room, where my parents had once laughed, oblivious to the darkness lurking beneath their feet. I passed my old bedroom, the closet doors still firmly shut, a silent testament to the terror it once held. But I wasn't here for the closet. The entrance was in the kitchen, hidden beneath a loose floorboard near the pantry. I remembered the struggle, the effort it took for my small 7-year-old hands to pry it open. Now, with a grim determination, I lifted the board. A wave of that familiar musty scent, the smell of old books and damp earth, washed over me, stronger than ever. It was the demon's breath, a chilling welcome. I descended into the darkness, a flashlight clutched in my trembling hand. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. Cobwebs brushed against my face, feeling like phantom fingers. The beam of my flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a cramped earthen tunnel. This was where it had waited. This was where it had watched. I crawled forward, the silence pressing in on me, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. And then, I saw it. Not a physical form, not yet, but a distortion in the air, a shimmering heat haze in the cold, a deeper shade of black against the already oppressive darkness. It was larger than I remembered, a swirling vortex of malevolence. "You came back," a voice hissed, not from the air, but from inside my own head, a voice that was both ancient and childlike, a chorus of whispers and screams. "I knew you would." My breath caught in my throat. What are you?" I stammered, my voice a pathetic croak in the vastness of my fear. The darkness pulsed, expanding, contracting. "I am what you fear. I am the forgotten, the unacknowledged. I am the shadow of your innocence, the price of your escape." A horrifying realization dawned on me. It wasn't just a demon, it was a part of me, a manifestation of the fear and trauma I had buried deep within, a part of my childhood I had tried to excise. It had grown, festered, and now it was ready to reclaim what it believed was its own. The air grew colder, so cold it burned. The swirling darkness began to solidify, tendrils of shadow reaching out, grasping, pulling. I could feel its icy touch on my skin, 1,000 needles pricking at my flesh. It was trying to consume me, to drag me back into the abyss of my own buried past. "No!" I screamed, a primal roar of defiance. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about reclaiming myself, about fighting for the man I had become, free from the shackles of a childhood terror. I raised the flashlight, not as a weapon, but as a symbol, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Its beam, though weak, seemed to momentarily push back the swirling shadows. It recoiled, a sound like tearing fabric echoing in the confined space. It was vulnerable to light, to acknowledgement. It thrived in the forgotten, the unexamined corners of the mind. "You cannot escape me," it hissed, its voice laced with a desperate fury. "I am you." "No," I whispered, my voice gaining strength. "You were, but not anymore." I focused all my will, all my resolve on the beam of light, pushing it forward, willing it to grow, to consume the darkness. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a battle waged not with fists, but with will. The demon shrieked, a sound that tore at the very fabric of my sanity, a sound that was both a child's wail and an ancient cosmic scream. It writhed, its form flickering, struggling against the light, and then, with a final agonizing gasp, it began to recede, shrinking, dissolving back into the shadows from whence it came. The cold began to dissipate, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of the crawl space. Just the crawl space. The air lightened and the oppressive weight lifted from my chest. It was gone. Or was it? I lay there for a long time, sprawled in the dirt of the crawl space, gasping for breath, the flashlight beam a weak halo around my trembling hand. The silence that followed was not the suffocating silence of its presence, but the vast, empty silence of its absence. It was gone. The cold was gone. The whispers were gone. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Slowly, painfully, I pulled myself out of the crawl space, my limbs aching, my body covered in dust and cobwebs.
The kitchen, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, seemed impossibly bright, impossibly normal. I stumbled out of the house, not bothering to close the door behind me, and collapsed onto the overgrown lawn. The air outside was cool and clean, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth. A different damp earth. A living earth, not the stagnant, fearful scent of the crawlspace. I spent the next few days in a haze, a blur of exhaustion and a strange, unsettling peace. The scratches on my arms faded. The cold spots in my apartment vanished. I slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in years. My friends noticed the change, the return of the old me, the one who laughed easily and didn't flinch at every shadow. I told them I'd been stressed, that I'd finally taken a much-needed vacation. They believed me. How could they not? How could I explain the battle I'd fought, the demon I'd faced, the part of myself I'd finally confronted?
But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world outside is still, I catch a faint whiff of something. Not the overwhelming, suffocating scent of the crawl space, but a subtle, almost imperceptible hint of old books and damp earth. And for a fleeting moment, a shiver runs down my spine. I tell myself it's just my imagination, a lingering memory, a phantom sensation, but then I glance at the shadows in the corners of my room, and I wonder, is it truly gone, or is it merely dormant, waiting for another moment of weakness, another forgotten scent, another open door? The demon of my childhood may be banished, but the fear, the knowledge of its existence, that I know, will haunt me forever.